Hi, this is Sylvia Herzog. I'm with the Charcoal Project. You're viewing a presentation on profitability analysis that we put together for our Harvest Fuel Initiative Kenya group. We're happy to have two guests today to do this presentation. One is Morten Rasmussen, who is an economist and data analyst who has started his own business called Aarhus Analytics. Morten has spent a bit of time in Nairobi and is quite familiar with the briquetting business, so he's going to give us a good perspective on how he views the issues surrounding profitability in that business. With Morten is Bjorn DeJarnis, whose name I know I'm butchering, who also has a very strong quantitative and economic background and is working with Morten on the new business. Bjorn is also a quant trader now at Dansk Commodities. And both of these guys are in Denmark, so we have the perspective, a European perspective to bring today, but from two people who've spent some time in Kenya. So I hope you guys enjoy the presentation. We're going to have time for Q&A later, but if something is really unclear, please raise a hand and we'll just post the question to the speakers. With that, I am going to turn it over to Morten and Bjorn.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Welcome.
And I'm going to turn off my camera now, just to get the best connection possible. All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having us today. We are super excited to meet all you guys. Bjorn and I, we have researched the question of unclean cooking fuels quite a lot. Actually, we were considering moving to either Kenya or Uganda, actually, to start our own charcoal business or briquette business. But we decided to stay in Denmark and start our business, Aarhus Analytics, instead in the end. But we think the issue of unclean cooking fuels, deforestation, and the health issues associated with unclean cooking fuels is super important. And we really think it's one of the biggest issues our planet is facing. So we are really, really inspired by the work all you guys are doing, and for that reason we're also super happy to be here today. And we're going to talk about profitability. And as you can see, we're putting a strong hand at the front page of our presentation, because in a business environment, profitability translates directly into strength. You cannot have a strong and healthy business without focusing on your profits. You need to be profitable. So that's why it's an important topic. And before we dive into the presentation, we would actually like to ask you guys a question up front. So Sylvia, maybe you could pull out the first poll, and you guys can go ahead and answer it. And we're basically just asking whether your business is profitable. And you have these three options for answers. And please be very honest, even if you don't know if you're profitable, or if you are not profitable at all, please be honest and just go ahead and answer that. It is indeed really difficult building a strong, profitable business when you're working with the clean cooking fuels. We know that for a fact, since we have investigated the matter ourselves. So yeah, don't feel ashamed if you're not profitable. Then hopefully after this presentation, you will be inspired to and know ways to become profitable. All right. Hopefully you had time to answer. I don't know are we able to see the answers right away, Sylvia?
Yes, we are. And can you, I'm going to share them now.
All right, cool. So 50% being profitable, that's quite good, actually more than I expected. But also some that are not sure or are not profitable. So, I mean, that's great. That's the perfect starting point for a good discussion about profitability. So thanks for sharing. So let's get started. So in a strong business, you really should have three financial documents, three documents that track your financial performance. And I know Sylvia, she has a really nice Excel template, which you can use to track your financial performance for all these 3 documents. And I'm sure she'll be happy to share it if you're interested. However, it can be quite overwhelming for a small business to track all these financial parameters. So therefore, we are only going to focus on what we call the profit and loss statement today, which tracks your profitability. And we would encourage you to really prioritize the profit and loss statement over the other financial documents when you carry out your business, because that is the one we see as the most important. And we'll show you how to make such a profit and loss statement today. All right, cool. But let's start out understanding why we even need to care about profitability. And we have found at least three reasons why you really should care. The first one is quite obvious. If you are not profitable, you will eventually die. Your business cannot survive without profits. So profits is what gives you bread on the table, roof over your head, and it pays your bills. So you need profits, otherwise you will die. Secondly, it is really difficult to attract capital if you cannot demonstrate that you are profitable. So investors and even funds and NGOs, even the NGOs that are not interested in a return on investment, right? They just give you a grant and you can spend the money. But even they will not be willing to invest money in your company if you cannot demonstrate to them that you're profitable, because they will realize, they will just think, okay, they're going to be dead in 2 years anyway, so why put money into this company? I could use my money better. So that is why it's so important not only to know whether you are profitable or not, but also to track and document your profitability. And that's what you use the profit and loss statement to, right? Then you have a document that you can send to investors and NGOs. You can show them that you are in fact profitable. So that's the second key reason to care about profitability. And lastly, we are all here today because we want to save the world, right? We want to make the world a better place. We want to prevent deforestation, and we want to prevent people from getting sick from using unclean cooking fuels, right? But if we really want to have big impact, and if we want scale, then we need to build our businesses really big. We need to grow our businesses, right? And we cannot do that without profits, right? So the only way to achieve big impact is by being profitable. Björn and I, we sometimes, probably because we are economists, right? Cold, cynical economists, we sometimes talk about dreamers, and there are a lot of dreamers in the world of solving development issues. And a dreamer is a person who has a lot of good intentions. They have a really good heart, and they are really nice people to be around. But sometimes dreamers, they simply forget about profits. They care so much about the problem and making the world a better place that they forget to keep track of their costs and all this boring stuff that we boring economists are good at, right? But it is super important, and we cannot have impact, and we cannot save the world at scale if we don't care about our profits. So that is a key focus you guys should have if you want impact. And I actually have a first-hand experience of this. I have co-founded a Kenyan company together with one of my friends in Kenya, who is a Kenyan nurse. We are called Preg Journey, and our product is a mobile application where pregnant mothers, they can report symptoms when they're pregnant, danger signs, and they're also able to connect with health professionals who can then give them online consultations, right? And the product is really strong, and it really creates value for the consumer, for the mother, the pregnant mother. But we are not profitable. We have higher costs than we have revenue. So right now we have not been able to attract any kind of investments, And if we do not change our business model dramatically, we will die within a year or two, and thereby have no impact whatsoever, right? So I really know this from firsthand experience. You have to be profitable to have impact and to stay alive and get capital. So hopefully that kind of motivates you to care about profitability if it's not something you're already giving a lot of focus. All right, so let's jump into the component parts of our profits, just to understand, get our grasp or our head around what is profits, right? And it's actually really simple, as this slide hopefully demonstrates. So your profits is made up of your revenue minus your costs. So basically you have two ways of improving your profits. You can increase revenue or you can decrease your costs. And if we just start out considering the revenue side, you will ask, how can I increase my revenue? And here you have two parameters, and two parameters only, that you can adjust. You can adjust the quantity you sell, and you can adjust the price you sell at, right? And just knowing this fact that these are the only two parameters you can adjust to boost your revenue, this gives rise to two key strategic questions that you should ask yourself. The first one being, how can I increase my quantity sold, right? And of course, you could have several products, so I don't want to go into details with trying to answering this question, because I'm sure you guys have a much better sense of the industry and of Kenya, of course. So you'll be able to answer this question better than I can. But just to give you a few examples, it could be maybe I have to increase my marketing to increase product awareness. Maybe I have to set up more points of sale. Maybe I have to expand my product line. Maybe I should not only sell in 5 kilo bags. Maybe I should also sell in 20 kilo bags, right? But the key thing is here that you ask yourself this question and set time aside to find good answers to this question. And the second question, of course, is, what is the optimal price? So obviously, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but if you set the price too high, customers, they will use charcoal and they will use firewood instead, kerosene. And if you set it too low, you will not get as much revenue as you could actually. So it's also really important to find that sweet spot where it's not too high and it's not too low, right? It can be attractive to, or you might want to set it really low just to attract customers, but just be careful not to set it too low. And maybe you have to experiment a little bit. So I hope what you take with you away from the revenue side here is that these two strategic questions, you should really take them seriously, and you should have good answers to them, right? If you do that, then you will be able to increase your revenue. Great. So with that, let's move on to the cost side of the business. What we really want to outline here is that you have a wide range of different costs, and it can be quite difficult to identify them all and keep a clear track of them. But nonetheless, that is really important. If I came and asked you, what were your costs in December last year, 2020? You should, in fact, be able to pull that information out of your laptop, or of maybe it's written down on a piece of paper somewhere, but you should be able to pull that information out in 5 minutes and give me a clear answer to that question. And if you're not able to do that, then you will not know whether you're profitable or not. You can only know your profitability if you know your both revenue and your costs, right? So our key message here is just try to really identify your costs and track them on a regular basis, preferably on a monthly basis, right? And just to give you an idea of how you can think about these costs, they can be categorized into these 3 buckets, where you have your direct costs, which are associated directly to the production. So if you're producing charcoal briquettes, this would be your feedstock, for instance. It would be wages to people working in the production. Then you have the indirect cost. It could be rent you're paying for a plot of land. It could be costs associated with distribution and sales, etc. And then finally, you have your financial cost. This could be interest payments on loans. It could be taxes, right? And I just want to really point out that it's not important which of these 3 buckets your categories, your cost fall into, right? If you're unsure whether a specific cost is a direct cost or an indirect cost, it doesn't matter. What is important is that you identify every single cost and you track it on a regular basis, right? That will set you in a really strong position to understand your profits, right? And besides from that, it will also give you a better chance of answering this 3rd strategic question in a good way. Which of my costs can be decreased, right? You need to track them in order to answer that question. And this is also a very key question if you want to increase your profits, right? And before we move on, maybe Sylvia, you could pull in the second poll here related to the cost structure. And basically, we would just like you to list. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Yeah. So please go ahead and answer this question. So, are all your costs in your business relevant to your specific business? Are they listed here? And if anyone is missing, then please write them in the chat box, and then you can kind of follow along in the chat box, and we'll have a look at it afterwards, just to understand and inspire each other to get a better grasp around what are our actual costs in our businesses in this particular industry, right? Thanks for that. Are we able to share the results right away, Sylvia? Of course, not what is in the chat.
Yeah, I think people are still voting.
Okay, sure. Well, then while yeah, that is fine. I think maybe we'll just we will pick up on this after the presentation, then I'll just move on to Bjørn. So
well, I think we can share the results. It looks like most people thought everything was captured.
Okay.
But 2 people didn't. So the 2 people who didn't think everything is captured, could you either raise their hand or put in the chat box what's missing?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think maybe I was one of the guys who typed yes to the question.
Okay.
And I don't have a business, so it's not really relevant.
Thanks, Bjørn. Okay.
Let's see if something comes up in the chat, and then let's just move on.
Okay. All right. We'll stop sharing this one. So, sounds like you guys got everything covered pretty much.
Maybe, yeah. It sounds unlikely, I think.
Oh, Saeed said depreciation is not listed there.
Okay, actually,
it is listed there, actually, yeah.
But that's good, and we had marketing, and it's also listed. So yeah, that's great. Sounds like maybe we have everything covered then. Good. All right. So with that, let's move on. Word now to Bjørn. I think we have something mute there, Mike.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Bjørn.
Great. I have some weird delay. I don't know. Am I the only one?
No, I have that as well. If everyone can just make sure that mics.
Brian, could you mute? I think Brian is Brian, if you could mute, that would be great. Thank you.
Is he muted? All right. Yeah, that's good. That's way better. Yeah. So next, we would like to concretize what Morten just said by applying this profitability framework to a simplified business that we just made up. And I hope by doing this is to crystallize this simple idea that profitability is basically just a battle between revenue and cost. So here on the slide, you see the financials of this simple business that we made up. And to create a good overview of the revenue and cost structure of this business, we've made this waterfall diagram, which looks fancy, but in reality, this is just a fancy way to represent the profit and loss statement. Yeah, you see it has a revenue side and has a cost side, and the costs are subdivided into different buckets. Yeah, and then in the end, we have the profit. So if we take a look at the first example, we have a healthy business here. The reason why I'm saying it's a healthy business is because it has a positive profit. I still have some feedback.
Yeah, I think it's Brian. Do we have someone on the line who's called Brian?
Sylvia.
Yeah, he's muted now. I couldn't get him muted, but now he's muted, so we're good now.
Great. That's perfect. Yeah, so if we look at this business, we consider this as a healthy business because it has a positive profit. And where does this come from? So if we start looking at the revenue side, we see that it's a super simple business on the revenue side because it only has two sources of revenue. It sells 5 kilo bags of briquettes and it sells 50 kilo bags of briquettes. So this is relatively easy to grasp. But on the other hand, turning to the cost side, things get more complicated. Even in this very simplified case, with a whole range of different types of costs, which in the end has an impact of this business's profitability. And in general, it is our experience that the cost side usually is more complex than the revenue side. And but since both are important when determining profitability, we need to understand and know both sides. All right, so if we subtract the total cost from the total revenue, we get the net profit. And in this case, it's 100,000 shilling, which corresponds to 10% of the total revenue. So this company gets to keep 10% of its total revenue. And this it can either use to reinvest in the company or pay out as salary to the owner. But indeed, this is a healthy business due to the positive profit. It is as easy as that. So you might sit out there and wonder why bother spending all this time segmenting the cost and the revenue into single buckets, because you can just measure the total revenue and the total cost and derive the profit from these. Well, this segmentation is really important because this is actually what enables you to identify what drives the revenue and what drives the cost. And this in turn enables you to make strategic decisions about how to increase profits, which you can either do, as Morten says, by increasing revenue or decreasing costs. So in this specific example, this company has two main cost drivers. One of them is feedstock and the other one is staff wages. So in this example, if I were the manager of this business, I wanted to increase profits, then I would start looking into these two types of costs and see if I could lower them. I could, for example, try to renegotiate the contract on feedstock to see if I can get a lower unit price on that. Right. So this brings me to the next example of a similar business, but an unhealthy business. So this is basically the same business. It has the same revenue stream, and the cost structure is almost the same, except for two buckets. One being that feedstock is more expensive, or this company pays more for feedstock and pays more for transportation. And notice how the increase in these two cost buckets translates directly into the profits, because you can see now that the profit is not 100,000 shilling positive, but is now a 200,000 shilling loss, which stems directly for these increased costs. So again, if I were the manager of this company, I will dive in to see, okay, which costs are driving the negative profit, and try to do something about that. In this case, it would be to get some cheaper feedstock and do something about the very expensive transportation. Right. So that was a little example of how you can use this profitability framework to figure out how to increase your profitability. Right. If you go to the next slide, yeah, thanks, Morten. As I said before, the waterfall diagram representation of the profit and loss statement is a fancy way to represent it, but in real life, one would rather use an Excel sheet, because it's more flexible and it's easier to work with. So we have an example here of Excel profit and loss statement, where you have all the different cost and revenue buckets down in the rows, and you have different months in the columns. And if I were to drive a business, I would definitely use something like this to report my profit and loss statement. And Sylvia, can you pull up the poll regarding whether people would be interested in using an Excel sheet like this? Because we can make such a thing for you if you would be interested.
And maybe I can just chip in while people are answering here, that of course what it takes to use a template like this is that you spend time every month on reporting your cost and your revenues, right? So it does take some time, but we just believe that that time is really well given out, right?
Yeah.
Because you get a good view of your profits.
All right. That's 88% yes, and 30% not sure. All right. So it sounds like a solid yes, and we will definitely look into making such a template for you guys. Cool. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, Morten? Yeah, so just to sum up, so our hope with this presentation
Wait, did you guys lose Bjørn?
Oh, sorry about I just muted myself. Sorry about that. Yeah, so just to sum up our presentation, it's our hope that this presentation highlights that in order for you guys to run a healthy business, you need to be able to track your revenue and costs and get a really clear overview of this, because otherwise you will not be able to measure your profitability. And again, as Morten said in the beginning, like, being profitable is integral in order to stay alive as a business, attract the right amount of capital, and in the end solve the big cooking fuel problem. So yeah, we summarized it in 3 key points. That 1, you need to identify your revenue streams and cost drivers. 2, you need to track your revenue streams and cost drivers on a monthly basis. And then 3, you need to set some time aside to answer the question, how can I increase my profits? And as Morten said, that there are many ways to do so, and it's very depending on the context, what's more optimal. But it is good to sit down and think about how you can do this. Right, and then the last thing is that we would like to have some sort of open discussion because we are very interested in knowing if you guys have managed to increase your revenue or decrease your costs in a successful way. So if you have anything to share with us, please raise your hand and share your knowledge.
I guess also by now you can just raise any questions you might have as well.
Yeah, and also other questions.
Hi, Morten and Bjorn. Thank you for this presentation. It's great. I did want to ask, are there any particular ratios that you would suggest they focus on when they're looking at how to decrease costs? Anything in particular that you would say would really be helpful for them?
I mean, to be honest, the only ratio I care about is this ratio you see right here, right? The ratio between your final profits and the revenue. That would be what I would focus on. Also to simplify things for myself. I know you might have your own insights, Sylvia. So I think you should definitely go ahead if you have some ratios you think are key to running the business successfully.
I do think there's some key ratios, but I think also you can just if for example your transportation or your wages are the two big factors you have to look at, then you would really need to monitor those as a percent of sales over time and keep track of whether it's going up as a percent of sales. It can if you look at things on a weekly and monthly basis and you see big ups and downs, you need to be able to explain to yourself why you're having these ups and downs. Maybe just hired someone, okay, and then as your sales keep growing, you'll absorb that extra cost. That's fine, and the ratio will go back down. But if suddenly you realize that sales have actually declined and your wages have stayed the same, the ratio will point that out. And it sounds simple, and it sounds like of course it will. But on the other hand, if you don't actually look at this data and track it, then you probably won't be staying on top of what's happening with the wages or the transportation or whatever the cost is. So the best thing is, as they suggest, is to look at these numbers regularly and then look at them in depth in terms of like, okay, how are these costs doing as a percent of sales, and are they going up? Are they going down? And if they are, why? And do the analysis. Go talk to your plant manager or the person who's overseeing feedstock purchases and see why things are moving around and see if there's any improvement you can make. So I just think that measurement, you have to keep measuring, you have to stay on top of it. It's a constant battle, as they say. And things can go haywire really fast if you're not, keeping your fingers on the pulse with this. So, so I think that just kind of simple ratios like expense to sales ratios and how they're changed over time can really be a good indicator of how you're doing and help you keep tabs on it.
Yeah, that's a really valid point, definitely, and especially when you are now, it's kind of easy to see here when you have a visual setup. This waterfall slide, you can see how big is this transportation cost relative to my revenue, but obviously it's more difficult if you're down in an Excel sheet like this. So here it would be nice to know month by month that in month number 1 on January, my rent is 10% of my revenue, and then see how it changes over time, as you suggest. That'd be a good way.
Morten, if we set up a template, can we build in the graph, the waterfall graph?
I think we could do that, but the problem is it would not be flexible enough to include new items, new cost brackets, or new revenue streams. So, but let's try it out. We can definitely give it a try, but I think that would be difficult in Excel to make it flexible enough.
Okay. Does anybody want to chime in? You know, I know you all have some difficulties managing profitability. Beatrice, do you want to add anything? Obviously, you have issues with bringing up your volume, but there's some cost issues because you're in a rural area that might be different than other people's.
Yeah, thank you for the very clear and simplified profitability presentation. Yeah, but it's true. Yeah, when I hear, okay, you can only attract, you know, investment only when you are profitable. So I have many question marks because, I mean, of course, sometimes you need support. I mean, when you say that you can increase your volume, of course, we can increase when you have the capacity to increase your production, but only if, you know, you find the right grants or the right impact investor helping you to invest in the right machinery, invest and increase your working capital. I mean, this is the solution. So sometimes I don't get it. We are waiting for the entrepreneur to invest absolutely all his savings and everything, to take all the risk, you know, before helping.
Yeah.
For example, we know exactly that we have the capacity to scale up, and but currently we are only producing at a small scale because I'm really almost the only one, or thanks to some friends, family, we managed to invest in a small manual briquetting machine. We don't have access to electricity. Water is a problem. The road infrastructure is a problem. But of course, I mean, the indirect cost. I live in Nairobi because it's difficult to live in a production site without a proper mobile network and all this infrastructure. So I'm feeling sometimes that it's a bit merry-go-round, you know. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we are always expecting that the entrepreneurs is investing until what? Until we are bankrupt completely.
Yeah.
And I don't know. But of course, I mean, what you are explaining, we are tracking every month. You know, we have our own Excel file. Yeah, we shared with also Sylvia. We know our production. We know the sales we are making, especially in urban areas. In fact, yeah, I think for most of us, we have understood that. I think, yeah, the production of briquettes is mostly in rural areas, and I think the rural areas, they have a solution for the clean cooking problem faced in urban areas, because the demand is huge in urban areas, in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nairobi. The demand is huge. We have even, I mean, I'm mitigating my marketing strategy, otherwise I could not supply, you know, the potential customers who are here in Nairobi. So the problem is not the market for us, and the problem is not the market. It's really to find, you know, the right investment to properly scale up and reach this profitability. But because I live in Nairobi, of course, the indirect cost, like the rent of my apartment in Nairobi, is not covering our production. We are only currently, our sales are only covering the minimum production the expense, the operational expenses. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just to understand you right, you're saying that if you were able to get some investment so you could scale up your production, it would be easier for you to generate a profit. Exactly. Is that rightly understood? Okay.
Right, and we have already, you know, designed different projections, yeah, for a couple of years, and we know exactly, we have plenty of raw material, we have the capacity to expand, but we need help for that. Yeah, we need the financial injection for that.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point that in some cases, it's like you need some initial capital in order to get profitable. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Let me ask you, when you have you built out a business scenario, kind of a simulation, so you could kind of pretend just if I had this machinery, if I had the capital, what would my business case look like? What would my revenue then be? What would my different cost buckets, how much would they be? And kind of try to build that out and then see how much profits do I have left then. Because if I was an investor, I would like to see that view, right? If I give her some money, what kind of business will she be able to run with those money? And will there be a profit so I can get some returns on my investment? And if you gave me that and it seemed convincing to me, then I would make the investment. So what I'm asking is basically whether you have kind of put up that business case when you get in touch with investors.
Yes, we did. We have different projections, and I can share with you after the meeting. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's hear from someone else who has maybe focused on a particular cost or revenue, either done something to increase their revenue to improve profitability, or done something to decrease their costs. Transportation in particular, I know, is a big issue for all of you. Has anyone come up with any innovative ways to reduce their transportation costs? Or is anybody suffering from that? Go ahead, Dorothy.
It's Beatrice. Yeah, I can share.
Okay.
Yeah, we would have loved, to sell our briquettes in January, but I shared this issue with my friend Said. In fact, because of COVID also, COVID-19 has really affected many businesses in Kenya, including the transport companies, because we have basically super long, curfew here in Kenya, and the curfew hours are from 10 in the evening to 4 in the morning. So many transport, companies who used to transport goods at night, they lost their business. And it's what happened with the transport company we used since June 2020. So when we wanted to transport our briquettes mid-January, we found out that the company shut down because of this curfew issue. So we have been facing these difficulties, and finally it's only yesterday that I managed to get some briquettes in Nairobi, but we did a trial with a new transport company based in Voi. Ian is my husband, and also we are managing together the company. And so he had to go to Voice several times, and then he went to check more than 5 companies to find which one would be reliable. So the transport also, it's an issue now to find also professional, reliable, good transport companies who are still operating. And also we wanted to find, of course, a cost-effective transport company for shipping, our briquettes from Taita Tadveta to Nairobi. So I don't know for the other briquette producer if they are facing this kind of similar issues, or I know some of them, maybe they are closest to their market. They are selling their briquettes maybe close to their production site. For us, I know it's the tricky part.
Does anyone else want to chime in on transportation costs? Musoni, you and I talked about you have a new distribution method with the online company, and the delivery for that was interesting, where you were putting your product in a kind of a local warehouse for them to access. You want to talk about that a little bit? Yeah, not sure if Missoni is on.
I think, I mean, at least from our side, we would be super interested in hearing any kind of success story, because we know that it's a difficult business to be in, because you're basically selling a product to low income households. They don't have a very high willingness to pay, and as we just went through, there are so many costs associated with running a business like this. So any kind of success stories in regards to improving revenue or decreasing costs would be awesome to hear about.
Everybody is shy today, I think. I'm going to call it people. Brian, are you on? Do you want to talk a little bit about supplying the refugee settlement camp and what the cost structure looks like for that? Can't tell us. There we go. And now he's off. That was quick. Okay.
Can I just share about our business?
Thank you, Dorothy.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really a good one and very insightful. And in our company, I think the biggest challenge that we have to think through right now, we know we have done projection before, and we know we can be profitable, but with the right product and the quality. So currently what we are doing is we are really thinking about improving the quality of our briquettes. Even though we have thought through how we can reduce our cost of the feedstock, we are trying to see how we can work with women groups to deliver agricultural waste, because we are working in the rural area. So there is so much maize cobs like right now, and that is a very good raw material for carbonization to produce the char, and many other agricultural waste that we can really tap into to reduce our feedstock costs and reduce the transport costs, because for some of the farmers, they're just nearby, and we would really be able to take advantage of the closeness to the farmers to reduce that cost. However, our biggest challenge now is to invest in a machine, and that is already a capital cost, which means we have to recover that, reach our break even, and then start thinking of how to become profitable. But however, I really like the presentations and the sharing in this webinar. It is really, really educative, really informative of what to think through when you want to reach that profitability. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks for sharing also. And it sounds like you are already doing the right things, identifying some of the big cost buckets as feedstock and transportation, and thinking about how can we do something about that. And maybe our one recommendation could be when you want to raise capital. I know it's extremely difficult, but just keep in mind that when you do it, you really need to convince the investors that you will be making money, and you do it, and you can really do that in a very nice and visual way like this. If you set up a graph like this that is easily understandable, it's much easier to convince investors than if you use an Excel sheet like this, for instance. So maybe one advice would be to also think about how you present your business projections to investors. Really make it easy and understandable for them to see that you will be be profitable. Right here, you have a big 10% profits blowing up in their face, right? Which is much easier for them to understand than if it's hidden somewhere in a huge Excel sheet.
I would just like to add to that is that one way you're going to convince them that you can get to profitability is by showing them you have a really good understanding of your numbers. So if you are able to explain every square on this chart and how you're going to flip from negative to positive, then it'll be believable. But you need to have a good finger on the pulse and understand all the numbers in order to convince someone else that you can get there, which is another reason for you to go back and start tracking everything very closely if you're not already. I know a lot of you are, but a lot of you also do it in your head and you're not actually putting pen to paper and doing the calculations, which is very beneficial, even if it's a lot of work. And it gets easier as you do it more and you get used to using Excel or using some kind of spreadsheet analysis. But again, Morten's right. If you need to convince people that you have this growth potential, but you can only do that if they're comfortable that you know how to go from negative to positive.
Yes, I agree very much.
Thank you. And may I also request that you share this chart that you're just showing that explains everything very well. I think it would be very helpful to us too. Thank you.
Yeah, do you mind if I share the slides with everyone and with the people who couldn't attend today?
Yeah, no, don't mind at all. We'll send you an updated version after the call here.
Great, thank you. Well, we're getting close to the end of time. Does anyone else want to jump in the discussion and add anything?
I just have a simple point in terms of attracting investors. So as we said in the presentation, like it's important to be profitable. But another thing is that if I was an investor, I would like to know, besides the money-wise investment, what am I actually investing in? So if you guys are selling products that prevent deforestation, it would be nice in a pitch to see how many trees are saved due to your products, and add some soft measures on top of the profitability analysis when you send that out to your potential investors.
And I agree with that. Increasingly, social impact investing is becoming important. And if you have measures of income generated for population groups or trees saved or, carbon emissions avoided,
exactly.
that can go a long way towards helping you get some capital that is a little kinder than traditional bank or other financial institution.
Yeah.
And just remember that investors, they probably have some financial background or economists like Bjørn and me. And the language we understand is numbers. So really try to quantify as much as possible. And it's just really to stress the fact that you need the numbers. You need to get the numbers right. And you need to present the numbers in a convincing way. So exactly when Bjørn says, if you can tell them how many trees you are saving, that's good because that's a number. If you're just stating we are saving trees, if you write a sentence like that, an investor will not care much about it. But if you can see the number, that makes a difference. That's the language of investors. So quantify.
And by investors, also people who are giving grants. So not just financial investors, but grantors also. They want to see that you know your numbers well, whether they're financial or impact numbers.
Yeah, and that's why you need to track them. It's super important to track them, the numbers. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you write the numbers when you don't have the expertise, for calculating the proper CO2 emissions you are saving or reducing while using the briquettes you are producing, or when you don't have the expertise to calculate properly the number of indigenous hardwood trees you are saving while producing and using the briquettes. I mean, it's a question we have been asking for years, joining different accelerator programs or incubators, etc. And it's something that is very difficult. I mean, you can check multiple websites of briquette producers in Kenya. You will see that some, they will tell you that they are saving 80 trees by using 1 ton of their briquettes, and some they will tell you in that they are saving 23 trees while using 1 ton. When you're asking them how they are calculating, sometimes it's based on scientific papers that have been published in 2003 in Philippines, or some, you know, it's just by doing rough calculations. And it's something that's quite frustrating, because I know that it's these kind of questions are asked in different applications, but I mean, sometimes there are a very high expectation from, you know, how I can say that in English, but I mean, entrepreneurs, we have a lot to deal with, the daily operations, the projections, you know, the strategy, the business development, the partnership, the marketing, the sales, many things. And on top of that, yeah, people are expecting us to be expert and like bioenergy scientists as well. Yeah. And
that's a very good point.
It's very, very difficult. I mean, this kind of question, it's good to give, you know, this kind of impact. I would love to provide it. I would love. But yeah, when somebody really competent will come on the ground and do the right calculations. Thank you.
Well, Beatrice, I totally hear you, because, you know, we've been recently surveying, trying to find the most updated information on life cycle analysis for briquettes and charcoal, and it's very limited. But I think you can just do the best you can do. So if you have a study that you feel that you're comfortable with, for example, Marianne Jenga has done at University of Nairobi, and iCraft has done a lot of studies on briquettes on emissions. You could use her data and just footnote it and say, you know, this is what has been shown recently, that these kind of emissions and particulate matter reductions have been made. You know, obviously you can't generalize to every case, but you can give an idea of the direction at least, and you would have a credible source for it. And I don't, the academics aren't doing any better, so I don't think anyone expects you to do better than that. But I think if you have, as long as you have a credible source for your calculations, go ahead and make them. You know, we use in comparison to traditional charcoal, we use the old age efficiencies of 15% for traditional wood charcoal, which is probably underrepresents how much efficiencies a good charcoal maker can make, which would translate into 7 trees saved per ton of briquettes. So you can use things like that, and you can also just, you know, if you think that number's too low and you think the charcoal makers, you know, would get a higher percent, that's what you're comparing it. You're comparing your briquettes. What are they displacing? So if they're displacing charcoal, traditional charcoal where they're cutting down trees, then you're just trying to come up with a tonnage that equates to a certain amount of trees saved. And again, I think that people are just looking for direction and relative size of impact. And if you can justify your answer with legitimate calculations, I think it's all fair game, and no one expects you to go out and do a full life cycle analysis. It'd be great if you could, but those are really expensive and really done by engineers. So that's not what people are expecting. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to come up with some kind of impacts that if you can. I think that's the only way you're going to attract social impact investors.
I agree. And then be open about maybe the uncertainty associated with the estimate of the impact. Yeah,
I mean, Morten and Bjorn, I also have a background in economics, quite comfortable with just, you know, doing with what making calculations based off the information I have.
Exactly.
You just say, okay, this is what I have. to work with. So and
then you come up with a best
people
estimate.
Understand.
Yeah.
You know, so come up with some reasonable estimate, and people will be happy that you've tried to put some values on it.
Yeah. In the consultant world, we usually say that if you are plus minus 20% on point, then you're good. Then it's a good estimate. So, you don't have to be.
You want to be a little more accurate for financial projections.
Yeah.
And if you're a doctor, you want to be a little more accurate as well.
So, all right. Well, thank you guys very much. This has been a very insightful presentation. Really appreciate your efforts today and for showing up for us. Unless anyone else has any other questions, we'll just wrap up. But do you have any closing thoughts, Morten and Bjorn?
No, just thanks for having us. It's been fun, and yeah, we're super happy to meet you all, and keep up the good work. Just push on. What you're doing is super important.
Yeah.
All set. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you guys coming out today. Just a reminder to you guys, we do have our monthly call on Monday at the same time, at 3:30 your time. And we're going to actually start talking about life cycle analysis. So Beatrice, that was a wonderful setup for us, because you know, it's something that we want to work with all of you to figure out for your business. So hopefully this will spark you to come on Monday and to start discussing that and figuring out how you can measure that for your business. So with that, I'm going to end the call, but thanks very much again, guys, and we'll talk to the rest of you on Monday.
Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye.